You ever have one of those evenings where everything feels still? That was me that Thursday. Kitchen warm with the smell of garlic and chicken simmering, my little girl giggling outside as the sun slid low over our street in Brookhaven, Georgia. Our house isn't much, but it's ours, pictures of us on the walls, her crooked crayon masterpieces taped up like they were worth a fortune. I was still in my pale green scrubs stirring the pot, thinking about nothing bigger than how to get her to eat broccoli without a fight. Then came the knock. Not a polite neighborly knock either. 3 low, heavy thuds that rattled the frame. I froze, spoon hovering over the pot. It was too late for deliveries, and I wasn't expecting anyone. My daughter Lila peeked in through the screen door ball still in her hands. "Mama, someone's here." I stepped into the living room and saw a shape through the frosted glass called broad shoulders, uniform blue. But even from that blur, something was off. No cruiser in the driveway, no polite posture. Just a man filling the doorway like he owned it. I leaned toward the peephole and caught a pair of eyes so flat they didn't even register me as human. Name tag said Harlan. Never seen him before in my life. "Evening, can I help you?" I called through the glass. His reply was short and clipped. "Open up." "Police. Anybody home?" It wasn't the words, it was the way he pressed them into the air like a thumb on your windpipe. "Go to your room, baby," I whispered to Lila. She shook her head and glued herself to my hip. The second knock wasn't a knock. It was a pounding hard enough to rattle the pictures on the wall. My pulse jumped. I asked to see his badge. He just stared. Then his hand twisted the knob. The next sound was glass shattering. A pale arm shoved through fingers reaching for the lock like they'd done it 100 times before. I shoved Lila toward the hall, planted myself between the door and my child. And then he was inside. Boots heavy on the wood baton, loose in his hand. His gaze swept over me like I was furniture, then drifted to Lila, just enough to make my spine lock up. "You can't just—" I started. "I told you to open up." He cut in, smiled thin and humorless. He walked slow, dragging the baton along the wall like he was marking territory. Knocked a framed photo to the floor. Glass popped. Lila gasped from the hallway, and I stepped wider, blocking her from his view. "What are you doing in my home?" He muttered something about people not belonging here and moved toward our coat closet. Little yellow rain boots tumbled out. He kicked them aside like they were trash. "Leave now." My voice was tighter than I wanted, but steady. He laughed under his breath, and then without a flicker of hesitation he pulled a gun. Black steel held low, almost casual, but every nerve in my body knew what it meant. "Open your mouth," he said. Time stretched thin. I didn't move, didn't blink. Lila whimpered behind me, and his eyes darted toward her, just long enough for me to shift, widening the wall of my body between them. "Don't do this," I told him. "Calm, slow. You don't want to do this." He tilted his head to smirk, fading as if he wasn't sure whether to push harder or back off. The air between us was thick enough to taste gun oil, spilled flowers, my own adrenaline. I counted his breaths, waited, and then the faint wail of sirens in the distance. My ears caught it before his did, and I knew this was my crack in the door. His shoulders stiffened when the sound reached him. Red and blue light began to lick the blinds. He tried to hold his stare, but his grip on the gun shifted. "You don't want them to see this," I said, voice low but sharp. "Put it down and walk away." Outside boots on gravel. A voice, Sheriff's Department. "Step outside." Harlan's eyes darted between me and the door like he was weighing two equally bad options. 3 sharp knocks hit the frame. Something in him faltered. He looked down not long, but long enough for me to see the fight draining out. "They're gonna come in," I warned. "And you know what happens if they see you like this." His breathing deepened. Then slowly he lowered the gun to the counter. The clink of metal on wood was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. He stepped back, hands in the air, as deputies filled the doorway. They didn't yell. They didn't rush. Just moved with that steady precision of people who've done this before. One collected the weapon. Another subtly blocked Lila from view. I wrapped my arm around her, felt her little heart racing against my side. Harlan didn't resist as they walked him out into the wet night, red and blue bouncing off the rain-slick street. When the door shut, the quiet felt almost unreal. I took in the scene, the broken glass, the water stain from the vase, the overturned chair. It was still my home, but it had been violated in a way I couldn't just grub clean. I pulled Lila onto the couch, wrapped us both in a blanket. We sat there, listening to the rain and the fading hum of engines until our breathing matched again. Months later, I found myself in a courtroom facing him across the aisle. My stomach was steady this time. The key evidence, a recording of his own voice saying things no badge could excuse, played for the room. His jaw, clenched eyes flicking toward the exit before locking on the judge's stare. When it was over, a young reporter caught me at the door. "How did you know?" she asked. I smiled just a little. I paid attention when no one else did. Outside, the day was soft with rain. I walked past the courthouse, stopped at a little cafe for coffee. Sat by the window, steam curling from the cup, and watched people pass like nothing monumental had just happened behind those walls. It wasn't triumph. I felt more like the quiet of knowing I hadn't bent when it mattered most. You know, folks think courage is loud, that it's all shouting and grand gestures, but sometimes it's just standing there, heart pounding, not giving the other person the thing they came for, your fear, your dignity. So tell me, what would you have done if it was your door, your child, your line in the sand? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about where that line is, and what happens when someone dares to cross it.